Good evening, students.
Good evening, sir.
So we'll get started. So we have completed fourth chapter, right? I told you yesterday there is only one problem that we need to do, which is important as well. So mark this problem and let's solve this problem. Okay. So let me copy this. Listen. So in figure 4.15, it shows a long straight wire of circular cross section of radius A carrying a steady state current I. The current I is uniformly distributed across this cross section. Calculate the magnetic field in the region R less than A and R greater than A. So the diagram is this thing. Right. See, actually, the current I is there, right? So if you read the question correctly, the current I is distributed over what? Current I is distributed over the cross section. Okay. So if the total current, listen to this carefully, is I, it is distributed over an area of how much value? A, which is equal to pi A square. I hope you're able to understand this, right? So if I take a small cross-sectional area, which is less than A, then let's say the current in area pi R square is I dash. Then what is going to happen is I dash divided by pi R square is equal to I divided by pi A square. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to equate their densities. Okay. Since the current is uniformly distributed over a particular range. Yesterday I would have told you this point, right? For a solenoid, if it is 1 centimeter and the number of windings is capital N, if it is 2 centimeter, the number of windings will be 2n. Right? In a similar way, if the current in the region pi A square is I, the current in the region pi R square is I dash, then they will be in the same proportion. That is the meaning of uniformly distributed across this cross-section area. Okay, wherever you see the word uniformly, it means the proportion is same. Am I clear? So I dash will be equal to pi and pi will get cancelled. I into R square divided by A square. So let this be equation number 1. Okay. So have this point in your mind. Let this be equation number 1. Now, what are we supposed to do? We need to calculate the magnetic field in the smaller region and in the bigger region. So how to do this is using Ampere's circuital law. We can say the line integral of B vector dot dl vector is equal to mu naught into I net. Okay. So for the value R less than A, see what is going to happen. The line integral of B vector dot dl vector will be equal to mu naught into I dash. Because I dash is the current that is confined to this area. Okay, that is why I wrote I net is equal to I dash. Now, we also know that the angle between B and dl is going to be the same. So the line integral of B into dl into cos 0 degrees will be equal to mu naught into I dash. So if you take B outside, B into line integral of dl will be equal to mu naught into I dash, B into, what will be the line integral of dl, guys? If you add all the dl's on the circle, it is going to give you the circumference. So it will give you 2 pi r is equal to mu naught into, what is the value of I dash? I into R square divided by A square. This is for R less than A. So R and R will get cancelled. B will be equal to mu naught I R divided by 2 pi A square. So B is equal to mu naught I R divided by 2 pi A square.
So can you say how you cancelled R and A square, sir?
Where did I cancel R and A?
So that R square went no, sir. Can you say how this R?
This is R, other side is R square. So 1 R I cancel.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so B is equal to mu naught IR divided by 2 pi A square for the value of R less than A. Okay. Done? Now,
Yes, sir.
for the value of R greater than A, what is going to happen? Let's take this diagram. So for the value of R greater than A, if you look at the Amperian root they've considered, it is again a circle. So the line integral of B dot dl into line integral of B vector dot dl vector is equal to mu naught into I net. So line integral of B into dl into cos 0 degrees will be equal to mu naught into this region is going to cover the total current I in the conductor. So here it is going to be I. Because the total current is distributed only in this area. So outside that area, if you take any value, the current enclosed by this Amperian loop is still going to be I only, right? So the line integral of B into dl will be equal to mu naught I because cos 0 is 1. So B into line integral of dl is equal to mu naught I, which implies B into, what is the line integral of dl here? It will be 2 pi r, which is equal to mu naught I. So B will be equal to mu naught I divided by 2 pi r. So the magnetic field within the area is going to be mu naught IR by 2 pi a square, and outside it is going to be mu naught I divided by 2 pi r. Okay. The last point that we need to make a note is, how will the graph look for the variation of B with respect to R? From B, if you take the value of R till A, where A is the radius of the circle, here it is directly proportional to R. Observe, mu naught I by 2 pi a square is a constant. Because mu naught is constant, I is steady current, 2 pi is constant, and A is the area of that wire. So B will be directly proportional to R. And after this, what will happen? It will decrease inversely. So B will be inversely proportional to R. Please copy it. Okay. So with this chapter is over. Is there any doubt? Is there any doubt, guys? All the concepts are clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now we will be starting with the
diagram for this sum, sir.
Which diagram?
For the sum which you did, numerical.
This diagram? Huh? This diagram or the graph?
This one, sir. This one.
Oh.
So the first case we took R as the inner one, right, sir?
Yeah.
And then for the
First
second
case,
case,
R
the
is
outer
nothing.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. So assuming there is no more doubt, we'll get started with the. Tell me.
Sir, in this example, in the second part, when R is greater than A, sir, like how we did for R is less than A, we can also calculate I value, no, sir. I will be equal to I dash by A square by R square. No,
wait. Speak. I'm saying you need not calculate it. The reason why I calculated inside is, can you tell me why I calculated inside? Because
current is flowing only inside that conductor.
Inside, and this current is distributed over the cross-sectional area pi a square. Correct? Huh? Whereas when some part of the region is only involved, then in this region, how much is the current is what we need to find. It is definitely not going to be total current I, rather it will be lesser current. That is the reason why we did it there. Whereas when you take the region outside, whether you take a radius of value A, 2A, whether you take the value of R to be 2A, 3A, 4A, for that matter, even at infinity, if you take the Amperian loop, the total current enclosed by the Amperian loop will still be I only. Yesterday, I told you one point, no. If the Amperian loop, if the current carrying conductor is like this, and if I take this point as P, how many conductors does it have? It has only one conductor, and the total current enclosed by the Amperian loop is I1. That is the reason I didn't take it. Okay, whereas sir, for inside, you need to take it.
Okay, sir. Understood.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get started with the next chapter. That is magnetism and its matter. This is the 5th chapter. Okay, it is a very small chapter actually. Generally, after 4th, I always teach 6th and then come to 5th, but okay. We can go in order also. Okay. So before we start this chapter, tell me what are all the things we have seen till now. The first 2 chapters dealt with electrostatics, that is the charges at rest. Then we saw current electricity. Then what did we have? We have moving charges and magnetism. So how did this chapter help us to understand this chapter? So the 4th chapter, we understood that wherever electrons were in motion, that is whenever electrons were in motion with a speed of drift velocity, that is current was generated in the conductor, what is it you could find around it? You could always observe magnetism around it. Now the question is, what will happen as soon as the potential source is drawn back? The potential source is drawn back. That is, when no current is flowing through the circuit, what do you think? Will the material still be able to exhibit magnetism?
No, sir.
Why? Because it is able to... Yes. Tell me.
There's no current flowing, sir.
Yes, because of the current which was flowing through the conductor, it was able to generate magnetism, right? So can I say these kind of magnets are temporary magnets? Because they have magnetism as long as the current is flowing through the conductor. And which materials are actually acting as temporary magnets? They are the electromagnets, correct? So the electromagnets are basically acting as the temporary magnets. Now again, we are going to read about magnetism and matter. Why are we doing it? We have already completed in the previous chapter. No, why are we again going into it? So if you think of the answer for it, what do you think is going to be the difference between previous chapter and this one? Here also it is magnetism.
Stationary magnetism for stationary objects, sir.
No, it is about permanent magnetism. That is, in our nature, there are two kinds of magnets that are existing. One is, so there are two kinds of magnets that are existing. What are they? One is temporary magnets. So temporary magnets will solve the purpose of generating magnetism whenever we need. Means, let's say you want to design a particular magnet, okay? And you want that magnet, let's say you're designing a magnet for a school exhibition, okay? And when you take it to that particular exhibition, what you will do is, let's say the judge is coming. At that point alone, if you're able to show the magnetism, then what will you do? You will take that device and connect it across a battery source, and you will show the magnetism. Once the display is over, what can you do? You can remove the battery. When you do that, what will happen? Your purpose is solved. At the same time, you have generated the property of magnetism also. If suppose that is an experiment which you wanted to demonstrate, okay? Whereas there are materials like bar magnets, horseshoe magnets, all these exhibit permanent magnetism. That is, they don't have any connection with respect to whether you connect a battery across them or not. You take that material close to an iron bar, it will start attracting them. Am I right? So those kind of magnets are called as permanent magnets. So in the previous chapter, we got idea that magnetism and electricity, these are two different branches of physics. We understood that electricity and magnetism are very well interrelated. Means you can generate magnetism from electricity. That's what the fourth chapter told, right? So when you talk about a permanent magnet, there are various questions that started arising. So listen to this carefully, guys. I have certain questions you people tell me. Let's try to ask these questions before we find the answers for it. See, the fourth chapter told us that magnetism can be exhibited when the charges are in motion, right? Rather than simply saying motion, the current should be constituted because of the motion of that particular charge. Accepted? Now I have a question. When you take a permanent magnet, you would have seen it, right? You would have seen it in many places. You would have experienced the property of magnetism also, right? If you take a permanent magnet, is that connected across any potential source?
No, sir.
Then where is that material able to get the magnetism from? Because magnetism to be exhibited, charges need to be in motion. That's what the fourth chapter clearly told us. You put the charge in motion, yes, you can generate magnetism. But where are these permanent magnets getting the magnetism from? That is where an important question that gets raised, right? So what justification are we going to give to say that the permanent magnets are exhibiting magnetism only due to this reason? Can anyone guess?
One thing is ions present in the atmosphere, sir.
Ions present. No, not everywhere. No, you take them anywhere, it will exhibit the magnetism. Need not be. Nothing to do with ions. Nothing to do with ions in the atmosphere, especially. There should be an inbuilt property in that material. Nothing to do with the surrounding. Right? Okay. I'll give you some hints. So when you talk about electric current within a conductor, what comes to your mind? So if somebody tells you that there is a current which is constituted in this wire, the current is constituted only when the charges are in motion, right? This is a known fact. So when you talk about a conductor, what is the nature of charge that comes to your mind which are in motion?
Electrons.
You talk about electrons, right? So electrons flow from lower to the higher potential, as a result of which current's direction is taken in the opposite path. Current flows from higher to lower. So though we use the word current as Q by T, it is actually the electrons which are flowing within a conductor, right? And those electrons are the ones which gave rise to magnetism in the concept of magnetism that we learned in the 4th chapter. Then what do you think will be the reason for permanent magnetism also?
Flow of electrons, sir.
It is the same electrons, right? Because we know the fact that, see, in today's world, we know, right? Maybe during the time it was discovered, people wouldn't have known. But today we know the atomic structure, all those things we know. Different kinds of atoms that are possible, how the electrons are actually moving, all those things we know, right? So according to Bohr's theory, what should be the structure of an atom? There were different atomic structures proposed, right? Can you guys tell me what were all the theories that came into existence? Who discovered electrons first? So first it was Thomson, J.J. Thomson, who proposed the plum pudding model. You know about the Thomson's cathode ray experiment, all those things, right? So the plum pudding model came. There were some drawbacks in it, due to which was found by Rutherford from his alpha ray scattering experiment, right? From Rutherford's experiment, there came a term called as nucleus. After that, who came? Niels Bohr. So what did Niels Bohr say? He told that electrons can revolve only in those orbits where certain things are quantized. What are they? The angular momentum is quantized. Do you guys remember this? You guys remember this? We have to use all these theory. So from his theory, we are clear that any atom you take, it consists of a central core called as the nucleus, which consists of protons as positive charge and the neutrons, right, which are neutral particles, around which there are electrons which are revolving in continuous orbits. Now we have a question. When the electron is revolving in an orbit with a constant velocity, is it going to constitute to the current or not? The answer is, because of the centripetal force, the electron is able to revolve in a particular orbit, due to which that particular electron will exhibit the property of electricity, right? And we know that when current is constituted in a particular path, magnetism is going to get generated. And the answer to the question is, every material in this world is made up of atoms, and atoms consist of electrons which are revolving. Hence, we can say that every material will have a magnetic property associated with it. The extent, the intensity to which it can attract the other particles depends on many other parameters, which we will be discussing under the concept of magnetic substances. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is, every material is made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of electrons. And since electrons are in continuous motion around the nucleus, they constitute to current. Hence, the materials will exhibit the property of magnetism. Okay. So the first topic that we are going to see is the left out one in your 4th chapter, which is called as the magnetic dipole moment of an electron. So there is one topic alone that I would have not explained in the 4th chapter. I'll show you which page number it is. Just a minute. This is the only topic I would have not explained, because this is the starting of the next chapter. The magnetic dipole moment of a revolving electron. Okay, I want you all to listen to this carefully. Okay. 1 minute. So in chapter 12, that is atoms, we will read about the Bohr's model of the hydrogen atom. You would have definitely read it, right? About the scientist Niels Bohr in 1911 was a stepping stone to the new kind of mechanics, namely quantum mechanics. So in Bohr's model, what is the theory proposed by him? The electron revolves around a positively charged nucleus, much as a planet revolves around the sun. So the force in the former case is electrostatic, while it is gravitation for the planet and sun case. So it is because of this motion of electron in a particular orbit, we are able to say that magnetism is exhibited by materials. So please write down the heading as the magnetic dipole moment of a revolving electron. And this is a derivation. Okay. The magnetic dipole moment of a revolving electron. Okay. Now let's try to understand. Concentrate. Okay. If there is any doubt, get it clarified. So if there is a nucleus like this and you have an electron, let's say this electron is revolving in the anti-clockwise direction with a speed v and angular velocity omega for the time being. Let's say the radius of this path is r. Okay, radius of this orbit is r. Now, what does current definition tell us? The mathematical definition of current is amount of charge flowing per unit time. That is the rate of flow of charges. Right? So, what is the charge that is flowing here? It is E divided by, what is the time taken by the particle to complete one revolution? It is T. Right? So, I will be equal to E divided by, how can I write time in terms of the circumference and speed?
2 pi r by v.
Very good. So it will be E into V divided by 2 pi r. Let this be equation number 1. Okay. But we are getting the idea of this kind of an atomic structure only from the Bohr's theory. So Bohr proposed this thing. Bohr mentioned that electrons will revolve only in those orbits where the angular momentum is quantized. Okay. Now I have a question. What is the formula for angular momentum? You guys know this? Angular momentum is nothing but the moment of linear momentum. Okay. It is mv into r is equal to n into h divided by 2 pi. This is called as Bohr's quantization condition. Okay. Let me take this as 2. From 1, I can say I is equal to E into V divided by 2 pi r. No. What I will do is, I'll multiply with mass and divide it with mass. One minute. Yeah. So I'll multiply with mass and divide it with mass. Sorry. Wait.
Sir, in equation 2, what does n mean, sir?
M is the mass of the particle. N?
No, sir, n, sir. Yes.
N is the principal quantum number.
Okay.
That is the orbit number, to put it in simple terms. Right?
Okay.
Okay. So we have found angular momentum. We have found what is current. But what is the topic? The topic is magnetic dipole moment. So what is the formula for magnetic dipole moment is? So magnetic dipole moment capital M is equal to, can I call it as I into A? This is from the knowledge of the previous chapter. It is I into A, but I is how much? EV divided by 2 pi r into what is going to be the area in which the electron is revolving? It is pi r square. So r and r will get cancelled. Pi and pi will get cancelled. It is EVR divided by 2. Clear, guys? It is E into V into R divided by 2. This is also equal to E into V into R divided by 2 into multiply with mass and divided with mass. There is reason why I am doing it. Because by doing it, we will get M into V into R. So E divided by 2M into MVR. Right? What is this thing, guys? It is the magnetic dipole moment in terms of magnitude. This is the magnitude of the magnetic dipole moment. E divided by 2M into MVR. Okay. But E divided by 2M. Okay, I'll do one thing. Can I write this as E divided by 2M into capital L, where capital L is the angular momentum? So the symbol for angular momentum is capital L. So capital L is equal to MVR is equal to NH divided by 2 pi. So from this, an important expression that we can derive is M is equal to E divided by 2M into capital L. Okay. Now, we should always ensure, whenever you're deriving a formula, right, we should always ensure whether you can replicate those things in practicals. Okay. So when you're doing it practically, the issue that you'll be facing is, it is not possible for you to calculate the angular momentum directly using M into V into R. Because these are all microscopic values, right? You need to go with the nanotechnology or something to find all those things. So it is not practically possible every time. Rather, what we can do is, we can bring in a formula which is even more easy to apply so that you find it theoretically as well as practically. So what we can say is M is equal to E divided by 2M into, in the place of angular momentum, can I write it as NH divided by 2 pi? NH divided by 2 pi. Right. So what will this give us? N into E into H divided by 4 pi M, where E is the charge of electron, H is what? You guys know this already. E is equal to H nu, where H stands for?
Planck's constant, sir.
Yes, it is Planck's constant. 4 pi is obviously a constant, and M stands for the?
Also the electron.
That's right. So M will be equal to E into H divided by 4 pi M. If N is equal to 1, then M will be equal to E into H divided by 4 pi M. If you substitute the value of E as 9.1 into 10 power minus 31, H as 6.626 into 10 power minus 34, divided by 4 into 3.14 into mass of the electron as 9.1 into 10 power minus 31. 1 minute, sorry. This 1.6 into 10 power minus 19. Okay. If you substitute all these values, then you will get this value, which is 9.27 into 10 power minus 24. You will get 9.27 into 10 power minus 24 ampere meter square, and this value is called as Bohr's magneton. So depending on the orbit in which the electron is present, you can just multiply this value with the number. Okay. So let me show this value to you. So this is called as Bohr's magneton. And you would have learned in your chemistry about the directions in which the electrons spin, clockwise spin and anti-clockwise spin, right? This will help you to understand the clockwise and the anti-clockwise spin concept, based on which you can decide which material is paramagnetic, diamagnetic, or ferromagnetic in nature. Okay. 1 minute. So I hope everybody has copied this, right? Any doubt?
No doubts.
Okay. Listen to this again. I wrote M is equal to E divided by 2M into L, right? Now, if I have an electron revolving like this, if I have an electron revolving in this path with speed v, and let's say the radius is r. Okay, electron is revolving in this direction. Then can I say that the current is in this direction? Right. So when the current is flowing in clockwise direction, when the current is in clockwise direction, magnetic dipole moment will be equal to how much? Or magnetic dipole moment will be in which direction? Sorry.
Anti-clockwise, sir.
No. I've told this already. Revisit your notes and let me know. I would have given a separate theory on how to find the direction of magnetic field. When I explained clock rule. Clock rule, if you want to know what is clock rule, this thing is clock rule. Sorry.
Sir, but electron is in the anti-clockwise direction, sir.
Okay.
So an electron only generates a magnetic field, right, sir?
Mm-hmm.
So then the magnetic field should also be in the direction of electron, no, sir?
No. Is that what previous chapter taught us? I didn't ask about magnetic field. Even that is wrong. Magnetic field is not in the direction of electrons revolution. Is that what Biot-Savart explained us? I was testing on an important point, right? Wherever you're doing cross product, what will be the direction of magnetic field? You guys would have written in your notes, revisit this concept, no? Check your notes, wherever I would have written this kind of, given this kind of a symbol, there I would have explained. Check your notes and tell me. Another hint is I would have told it is the reverse application of right hand thumb rule. Guys, these are all very important things. If the current is in clockwise direction, then the magnetic dipole moment is into the plane. If the current is in clockwise direction, then the magnetic dipole moment is into the plane. Please make a note of this. Take your right hand and curl the fingers of your right hand in the direction of current and extend your thumb. What will be the direction? Yes. Did I give that point or not? Check your notes. I remember teaching. Similarly, what is the direction of angular momentum? So angular momentum is given by this formula. It is given as r vector cross p vector. Okay. So r is in this direction. Momentum is in this direction. Okay. So r vector cross p vector, or it can be written as r vector cross m into b vector. So tell me what is going to be the direction, guys. Suppose for your convenience, if I take r like this and v like this, do the cross product and tell me the answer. No?
It will
So
be
K
outward,
cap, sir.
sir.
It will be, that's right. It will be in the direction of k cap. That is out of plane. So what I'm trying to say here is m vector is into the plane and L vector is out of the plane. And we know that m is equal to E divided by 2m into L, no? So m vector and L vector are always in opposite directions. An important point to be noted here is the magnetic dipole moment and the angular momentum are in opposite directions. Is it clear? Did you guys make a note of this?
Yes, sir.
So this is all about the magnetic dipole moment of a revolving electron. Okay. So that is the first thing. Let me read out certain points which you guys already know. Okay. You know what is a magnet? Basically, a magnet is a material or object that can produce magnetic field. The magnetic field is obviously going to be invisible, but we can sense it. However, it is mainly responsible for the most notable property of a magnet. So according to these magnetic properties, a magnet possesses a force that pulls on other ferromagnetic materials such as iron and attracts or repels other magnets, depending on the orientation. Why they are saying is, if you have a magnet like this, North Pole, South Pole, and you have a North Pole and South Pole, North and North will repel and South and North will attract. So you know what is a magnetic field, right? That is what our last chapter's whole objective was. So magnetic field is the magnetic effect of electric currents and magnetic materials. So this is what we know. A magnetic field is basically, it is an effect which is generated due to the magnetic currents, and some magnetic materials already have this property inbuilt in them. Hence, the magnetic field at any point, at any given point, is specified with both direction and a magnitude. Okay. So hence we know that magnetic field is a vector quantity. This also we know. So you can produce magnetic fields by using the charges in motion and intrinsic magnetic moments of elementary particles associated with fundamental quantum theory, that is their spin. What they're trying to say is, we can generate magnetic fields by the electric charge, by putting the electric charges in motion also because of the inbuilt magnetic moment. Just now I showed you, right? Electron has a magnetic dipole moment. So it is an intrinsic property. It is a naturally occurring property. Apart from the electron revolving the orbit, we also know the fact that the electron spins about its own orbit. Apart from the electron revolving around the nucleus, it spins about its own axis. So spin is also going to contribute to some magnetic field. That is what they're trying to say. Okay. And this is another fact which you already know. So if I take a point 1 here and point 2 here, if I ask you which point is having greater strength of magnetic field intensity, what will you say? Obviously,
1, sir.
Obviously 1. How did you say that?
Because field lines are close.
What number of field lines?
Because of the field line density, you can say that. This is a known fact to you guys. Okay. So based on this, let's see what are all the properties of magnets. Magnets attract magnetic substances like, see, magnetic substances. Substances are materials which respond to magnetic field. Okay. So magnets attract magnetic substances like steel, cobalt, iron, etc. This is also known as its attractive property, right? Secondly, when a bar magnet is freely suspended, it points in the north to south direction. The tip which points to the geographic north is called as the North Pole, and tip which points the geographic south is called as the South Pole. This is known as the directive property of the magnet. Means if you take a bar magnet and tie it to a thread and suspend it freely, then what will happen? It will start revolving, and at one particular instance, it will stop. So the point in which this north is being shown is called as the, so the point in which the tip actually, okay, let's say there is no point that is given, but you know which side is north and which side is south. So if this tip 1 points towards the north, then this is called as the North Pole. And this tip, obviously, if it's facing the South Pole, this is called as geographic south, we call it as the South Pole. Okay. Third, there is a repulsive force when north poles or south poles of two magnets are brought closer to each other. Conversely, there is an attractive force between the north pole of one and the south pole of the other. This states that unlike poles attract each other and like poles repel each other. There is also a known fact. And the last important property that we are supposed to know is, if I have a bar magnet, or for that matter, any magnet, right? Let's say it is of length L. And now I break it into two pieces of length L by 2 and L by 2. Can I say that this is the North Pole and this is the South Pole?
No, sir.
Because you cannot say it. Why? Because there is no concept of magnetic monopoles. Magnetism always exists as a dipole, unlike electric charges, where you can have an isolated positive charge and isolated negative charge, which are also technically called as monopoles. You cannot have something like that in magnetism. Means what will happen is the smaller portion will also behave like a magnet, which has both the poles. But the only fact is going to be, if this is having a strength X and this is having a strength Y, then X is definitely greater than Y. Means when you break it into smaller pieces, the magnetic strength of that material will decrease. But it doesn't mean it is going to act like a monopole. This is a very important point to be kept in mind. That is, we cannot isolate the north and the south pole of the magnets. If magnets are broken into two halves, we get two similar bar magnets with somewhat weaker magnetic properties. Unlike electric charges, isolated magnetic north and magnetic south poles, known as magnetic monopoles, do not exist. Okay. Next is, if there are materials which can exhibit this kind of property, then there should be something called as a natural magnet, and there are some materials which will exhibit the property of magnetism by artificially, that is by creating them, synthetic methods or whatever you call it. Okay. So what are natural magnets? So basically a natural magnet is an ore of iron that attracts small pieces of iron, cobalt and nickel towards it. It is usually an oxide of iron named Fe3O4, which is technically called, so magnetite or lodestone is a natural magnet. So Lodestone was the first observed magnetic material. I think in the 17th century. Okay. So naturally occurring oxide of iron is named as Fe3O4. Now, what is artificial magnet? Name suggests a magnet that is prepared artificially from the artificial magnets. What are examples? This we have seen done in the previous chapter, right? We created magnetism only till the time we needed electromagnets. You can think of a magnetic needle, horseshoe magnet, and bar magnets, etc. So according to molecular theory, every molecule of a magnetic substance, irrespective of whether or not it is magnetized. There's an important point. I told you, right? Every material will have the magnetic property associated with them. The extent to which it can exhibit the magnetic property differs. Okay. Next. So every magnet has two poles, right? What are the two poles? Obviously, we call them as North Pole and the South Pole. So if you take each pole close to some other magnetic substance, what will happen? These poles will exhibit a property of magnetism and they will try to attract that material towards itself. Right? Is that not what is going to happen? It is something similar to induction only. Right? Now, like how there is an intrinsic property called as charge, which can induce a force on other material, there is an equivalent concept associated with respect to the poles of the magnet, which we call it as pole strength. Means each pole is going to have a certain amount of strength associated with it, with which it can pull other materials towards itself. Okay. So if I say the pole strength of this material is, I'll call it as Q1, but don't get confused. Here, Q1 doesn't mean, I'm just using a symbol, okay? Q1 doesn't mean its charge. Q1 represents pole strength. And Q to be the pole strength of this. So generally for a magnet, both the poles will have equal strength. Okay. So there is something called as Coulomb's law of magnetism. So what did Coulomb's law speak in the case of electrostatics? Can someone repeat it? This you guys already know. When there are two
point charges, 2 point charges are present, the force of attraction or repulsion is directly proportional to the magnitude of charges and inversely proportional to the square of distance between.
So force is directly proportional to the product of the magnitude of the charges and inversely proportional to the square of the distance of separation between them. Similarly, Coulomb's law of magnetism says when there are two magnetic poles, okay, the force of interaction acting between two magnetic poles, generally I can say, let's say there are two small magnets kept like this. So let's say the pole strength here is Q1 and here it is Q2. Okay, this material has pole strength Q1, this has Q2. No. Then the force of interaction between them is directly proportional to the product of their pole strengths, that is Q1 into Q2, and inversely proportional to the square of the distance of separation between them. So F will be directly proportional to Q1, Q2 divided by R square. And if you remove the proportionality symbol, F will be equal to mu naught divided by 4 pi into Q1, Q2 divided by R square. Okay. So have this formula in your mind. Based on this, there is an important derivation that we are going to do that we will see it in the next class. Okay. And just to give you a brief introduction, this chapter is exactly similar to electrostatics. Okay, this chapter is exactly similar to electrostatics. So whatever result you're going to get there, here you replace with the magnetic parameters, you will get the required answer. So it is that simple. We can maximum complete it in 4 classes. That's it.
I have a doubt.
So, please tell me.
Can we say K equal to mu naught by 4 pi, sir?
Here it is not K that is used. K is generally used in the case of electrostatics. Here the constant.
The value of force will be different, sir, if we substitute K and then.
Yeah, it will be definitely different, no? Because K is what in electrostatics is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. That is 9 into 10 power 9. Whereas in the case of magnetism or magnetostatics, I can say the value of mu naught by 4 pi is not 9 into 10 power 9. Rather, it is 10 power minus 7. So value will change, no?
Yes.
You're able to understand. So why I told it is similar is because what did you replace from charge in the case of magnetism? You replace with pole strength. Is it not looking similar to the formula that you have learned there? And 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught got replaced with mu naught by 4 pi. Everywhere, this is the conversion that will take place. So if you remember the formula from electrostatics, you can easily remember the formula in magnetism. That is what I'm trying to say. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, understand the similarity as I keep progressing. Okay? So I'll go to the next concept tomorrow. Any other doubt?
No doubt, sir.
Okay, that's good. Okay, guys, I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.